Try this. I'm going to talk some about change, excitement, and about genes. But several matters that continue to occupy ordinary man's consciousness, but no one has perceived it in a certain manner, and the manner being this, for the night. That in an individual case, talking about ordinary people being dissatisfied, but in ordinary cases, that which would appear to be an individual's disagreeable genes have been fitted in to equal what? Throughout the ages. Such things as demons and up to today, psychological traumas. And what you need to see that I'm going to try and point to a little more directly is that this is a grand cordon. It is a prime achievement that humanity is structured in such a way that an ordinary person, remember we're taking an ordinary viewpoint, that they appear to be afflicted and their disagreeable genes. Let's take the most historic example, are referred to as demons. Now the Grand Prix manifestation of this would be, let us say, a minister, contemporary or otherwise, that a man of God can admit to some serious, to him, weakness. Women, booze, 14-year-old boys, and he can stand in a public place and admit it, and no fear, because he will say, I have this weakness, I have this demon, I have this evil spirit in me that makes me crave alcohol, but by God, friends and neighbors, I am struggling against it daily. And the flock will applaud. That is a fairly extreme example compared to some others I could pull out, but extreme examples are the best. And you now have people who would be staying at a cocktail party or amongst themselves in a family group would refer to it as a kind of psychological bruise, that I have this affinity for alcohol. But you do not know the situation in which I was reared. You do not know the situation vis-a-vis my father in drinking. Or a man can say, I seem to have a hostile attitude toward the opposite sex, but there is a reason for it. All of you read enough to know that a supposed just over the horizon, if at least it'll be acceptable just over the horizon, scientific breakthrough, in fact even down to practical levels, is going to be gene splicing. But I submit to you that they have it backwards. The real achievement is in gene separation, because that is what I'm talking about. That is what ordinary people have the ability to do, is to separate themselves from their genes. The demons make me want to drink. They're toying with my soul, the same way they did good old Jesus. Demons trying to tempt me, and I must struggle. All the way from that, except that is one end of a spectrum, into into psychological bruises that I am having to struggle against, the kind of traumas that I suffered as a child. But ordinary consciousness has the immediate ability, whether it be here in our day and time using psychological bricks, or whether it be in another part of the world, in a different time zone where people still believe in demons. They are separating themselves from their own genes. Now, we're not talking about any ability for one to find out through his own discovery that the nervous system as it is arranged now is not necessarily the extent to what one might be for a few people. I'm talking about now the ordinariest of the ordinary. Everybody. You at line level consciousness, your parents, your friends, the whole world, has the ability, and they may not use the would-be religious or psychological terms I just did, but that covers the gambit that in there somewhere, presidents, popes, rabbis, ministers, your grandmother separates herself from her own genes. My temper, my temperament, the humidity. Or if you're exotic enough to remember Flip Wilson, just simply, the devil made me do it. I had no part of this. I divorced myself from it. I deny that this is any part of me. This is also at the basis of what appears to be the verbal, the descriptions of the foundations, you might note, of all the world's religions. That somewhere the man, apparently the figure that was the founder of the religion in some way, specifically noted that he had been able, through the grace of the gods, to separate himself from some undesirable part of himself. From there, it is a small step into, I'll continue to use religious terminology for the moment, those who proclaim that God is in everything. The ones who said that, of course, were using God with a capital G instead of me saying gods, but that God is in everything. If there, in fact, were a four-dimensional world that I could put into words for you, then I would have to say that you would have to go toward the opposite end of the universe. That what you should be looking for is the DNA, the genes of each and every little piece to speak. And if we use their terminology of them saying that God is in everything, you would have to take verbally the opposite approach. And you would be saying that everything is in the general flow. As human consciousness attempts, has always attempted to define a line between here and out there, that all of human consciousness does proclaim in so many words that there is an out there. A prime proof to ordinary consciousness would be if the individuals under consideration were religious, they would say that the prime definition, the proof that there is an out there, is the fact that there is a creator of some kind. There is some kind of force, there is a spirit, there are gods. They're outside the structure. They're outside of our life. If they then move to areas that would be apparently a little more metaphysical, then they say that the reflections, little pieces of the gods, or their particular God, is down here in everything. It's in you and I, it's in trees, I guess, but that there is a piece of God everywhere. If you're going to attempt to take that approach and it had any potential profit, I am suggesting to you to turn it backwards, since there is no out there. And that what you should be listening for is that each little piece of what seems to be life has its own DNA, and it attempts to talk. And what you're attempting to do, no matter what I call it from week to week, but what you're attempting to do in part is you listen to each and every little piece talk to you about its origins, about its memory, and about its destination, because they are talking. Ordinary consciousness wants to perceive the notion of some metaphysical force, some transcendental force, as being a piece of something outside the system, a reflection of something outside the system, and that in some way you could allegorically learn from it. That would be about the epitome of ordinary would-be spiritual activity. that rather than taking everything literally, whether it be some holy book, would be those that have attempted and are accepted to be in some way metaphysical poets. And as they say, you can look upon the changes of the seasons, the movements of the heavens, the birth of a child as being some kind of reflection that there is a little piece of our dearly beloved God. The God of our forefathers in some way is now reflected, that those with acute metaphysical eyesight may learn a lesson. As much as words will stand it, that is backwards. That each and every little piece has its own memory of its origins. It has memories that I oftentimes simply refer to as the memory within your nervous system. That is, that you can redefine and rediscover history without going back and opening up your college records and picking out a new major. That you might simply sit and skim and Reader's Digest or something equally as innocuous and bland and make some reference to some point in history and something that happened, and you have a memory of it. I'm referring to each and every little piece, as I was saying, of DNA being in each and every little piece of life. But there is a continuing awareness in places that people would not ordinarily look. That's why I'm saying each and every little piece, that you do not have to be in a synagogue or a temple. You do not have to be out attempting to be allegorical. Being allegorical is just a passing phase. I know many of you enjoy it, and I enjoy you enjoying it. And sometimes I even bring in papers from, what's his name, Kyrut, that I guess would qualify as being allegorical. But allegorical is a really sort of a passing phase, like playing with yourself before you become sexually mature, assuming anyone is. Allegory is fine, but it's very limited. But you might also note how many people, including yourself, at some time thought of allegory as being an end within itself. That if I could just be allegorical, if I could just be as allegorical as somebody I have just read, especially someone who died 400 or 500 years ago. No one seems to have ever noticed that when you remove yourself far enough from a time zone, and I was using horizontal examples of just saying time itself, such as 400 or 500 years, almost anything that gets to be that old sounds allegorical because you're too far removed. It can be stated as being an absolute fact that Prince so-and-so traveled from Normandy and went down to Corsica and did so-and-so, and that passes for history. But if you find something, not just a historian writing that now in a textbook, but if you find someone who wrote about that at the time it happened, and you let your mind get caught up in a puff of smoke, or you already believe that you are destined to be allegorical, the further you get from something or the right conditions, it all sounds allegorical. I could suggest, if anyone cared to, that you could carry that a little further and even come up with your own possible examples, that some religions, some metaphysical works of art and literature, as they're called, may have started off as something else. They could have started off as somebody's St. Quantum's Day recipe. They could have started out as some kind of directions as to how to repair a gasoline-powered TV set. But you get far enough removed from it, and everything sounds allegorical. New and different. That's why I should have brought nose and glasses. I was going to bend over and pick up something and come back with a nose and glasses on. I have mentioned this before, but it's time for some of you to take another look, because you're going to be faced with it shortly. Is how truly difficult it is to do anything new. I've said that on more than one occasion, but let me point out in a slightly reinforced manner how difficult it is to truly do anything new, comma, in an exciting fashion. Throughout all the tasks I have given, throughout the personal suggestions I've given to many of you, throughout some of the attempts that many of you have made on your own to go out and take up a new hobby, to go back to school, to learn to juggle when you were originally a klutz, to try and whistle a tune when you were originally an affront to everything musical in the world. Some of you attempt to have an actual thought that was coherent, to make some sort of plan and actually be able to remember it for 2 or 3 days and then make some attempt to do it. Throughout all of this, one of the immediate lessons was to find out how difficult it is to do anything new, to change what you are. The circuits say otherwise, consciousness says otherwise, and it apparently finds examples that says change happens. I've also suggested to you that is one of the basic appeals of biographies. As you read biographies, whoever seems to attract your attention, you read a biography of anybody, be it favorable or otherwise, and one message of the biography is that people can change, because the person had some story. If it was an autobiography, or else the person who wrote it, if it was a biography, points out that the person changed. If they didn't change, there'd be no biography about them. There's got to be change. And you should know the patterns. The prime pattern, I guess, is somebody's going along and they're doing pretty good, middle class, and they hit the bottom and bounce back. They start in the middle, and they make it up somewhere big, then they hit the bottom. Then they bounce back maybe to the middle. Or perhaps they start, a smaller genre, is starting off real big. I was a Rockefeller. And then I took up crack and pot and 14-year-old boys, and I hit the bottom, but now I've struggled back. All biography is change. It's a story of change. And of course, they're replete, normally, with supposedly giving the thoughts of the person. Of course, any of you who can read, from any source, somebody giving the thoughts, that includes the person himself, an autobiography. And they're talking about what they thought about back when they realized when their grandfather slapped them and said, "Son, you're a Rockefeller, you got to straighten up." And I thought, anybody who can still read that without laughing, or anybody who can still read that and have any interest, it just shows how much you wasted your time. But at ordinary level, people read that, and I'm suggesting to you most strongly that that is the basic appeal, is there as proof. It's unanalyzed, but it's proof that change is possible. Just walk into the library, into the section, the one that's easy for all of us with limited intelligence. You don't have to look up numbers. You find the biography section, and it's in alphabetical order, and just pick out one. Anybody. All the way from saying a sissy to Goebbels. Then everybody changed. Everybody was doing all right, and then they had hard times, and they bounced back. And plus, I'll tell you a whole lot about what they thought and how they decided to straighten up their act and pull themselves back together. It is an unanalyzed message that change is possible. Comma. As I said, all of you should have your own non-pessimistic, approaching objective, if there was such a thing in a three-dimensional world, reality of how hard it is to change. Many of you are not the same person you were when we met. Sometimes you think about it, but a lot of that's allegorical. And when you get past it a certain degree, some of you can now, without any particular passion about it, say, I certainly have changed, except for the fact it's not all that different. I don't look that much different, and so on. The exciting part, somebody can attempt to change. You people can attempt to change. I could state some absolute new requirement and say everyone must meet this. Everyone must stop doing so-and-so. Everyone must begin immediately to do so-and-so, something that would reach almost everyone in here. And let us say that most of you would go along with it. Would there be any excitement to it? If I said everyone in here has got to drop 10 pounds in 10 days, and from then on, every 10 days, you got to drop another pound until we can't see you anymore. But if something of a continuing basis was going on, would it be exciting? Must I answer? Now, something might happen along the way with people involved with such as this, but ordinary people, what happens at your ordinary level of consciousness in times past? And even if you didn't do all this, your own DNA should have memory of everybody else doing this. Those old kinds of scenarios for which there should be no routine sadness, but times that you did attempt to change, to buy a new car, to get a new hairdo, get a new dress, and some of you guys even get new men's clothes. And you attempt to do it, and there may be excitement for a moment, an hour, a day. But you could look at what even passes for apparent change, of having a new car. How long does the excitement last? And when the excitement is over, what happened to the change? It's as though the change just does not exist. Now, several matters. Change itself, as I was suggesting to you recently, in the example of changing one's body, and of how popular that was, and about how popular that was in certain parts of life's body. And it was most popular, if not limited to its popularity, in areas wherein the higher circuits were the focal point. That is, that you do not find people in undeveloped countries, you do not find people in the ghetto parts of life's body hanging out at health spas and jogging. And I also was suggesting to you specifically that attempting to work on one's body is the one thing that definitely can be seen. You can see it. Whereas attempting to think a new thought, attempting to gain some new information, you can't walk around with it. You can attempt to tell a few people about it, but it is not the same as walking into a class reunion or walking into one of your normal haunts after being gone for 3 or 4 months. If you walked in, you lost 20 pounds, all you do is walk in. And everybody goes, hey. If you stayed away 3 or 4 months and you read the original untranslated version of Remembrance of Things Past, and it made you wax to yourself allegorically, and you walk into your bar and go, huh? Maybe even you got the book in your pocket. Well, the books. You take along at least one volume and you kind of hold it up when you go in and go, huh? You hold it up to your head like, huh, huh? Does anybody notice? Who's going to notice? What I was going to ask and suggest to you this week, is it easier to apparently affect change in the older circuits? That is, does it not seem easier? Now, this varies. There is not an absolute immediate answer that would be proper from all of you, because you're all not the same wired up kinds of people, and this varies from you people even sitting here. But all of you should be able to hear this. Is it not easier to apparently affect change on the lower circuits, that is, the red circuits as I'm calling them, than it is in your so-called human emotions and in your so-called human thought processes? All of you should know the answer to that. Whatever might motivate you, or if I said you've got to, would it not be easier if I gave you a choice? You have got to start feeling differently. I've been watching you, and you get the blues too much. If you ever get the blues again, and I find out about it, you're finished. And I point to somebody else and I say, now you're all right. I've got to where I know you enough that you're tolerable. But you got just you're just almost non-functional up here. Which life needs that, but that is not adequate here. You're going to have to crank this thing up and get it going. But if I said, all right, everybody has got to go to a gym, or we're going to set up a gym here in town somewhere, and everybody, all men, have got to put 2 inches on your chest and 3 inches on your arms and 1 inch on your thighs, and you've got to be able to run 10 kilometers in 45 minutes, and all you women have got to do something else. But it was all physical, and I say, you got X amount of weeks to do it. Just listen, you should be able to hear it. Would it not be easier? Even those of you who are generally intelligent enough to hate exercise, even you, would you not admit if I said, you've got to do one of those 3 to stay here? Don't you see that almost everybody, including the most intelligent of you, would pick going to the gym? Because all you got to do is just make yourself stagger in there, and whatever it takes. It's 45 minutes 3 times a week. All you got to do is stand there with a barbell, do this, and do that. But the rest of it would require something else, right? This you could almost do in your sleep. Would it not seem easier to affect apparent change on the lower circuits as opposed to the higher? Question 1. Question 1, small a. Is it easier to apparently affect circuits the older they are? All right, as I was indirectly hinting, can you see that there would be different levels, different types of difficulties in affecting change in the 3 circuits? It is not the same trying to affect change in the red circuits, and not just the obvious, that there are different difficulties in attempting to affect oneself in the red circuits as there would be in the blue circuits, in the yellow circuits. It takes a different kind of energy. If we were still talking about the attempt to directly affect one series of circuits, the blue, the red, or the yellow, there are different difficulties involved. There would be different types of energy required. Did I mention that Glenn was here? Different time periods would be involved. Now, I'm not going to tell you what they would be, but can you not hear the validity of this? Again, it varies from person to person a bit. But if you people belong here, you should be able to hear and feel in your own genes the validity of all of this, even if some of my examples would pour over closer to the man or woman next to you. It would be this, that there are different time frames involved to have a specific observable effect in the red circuits. Doing weights, losing weight, whatever it would be, there'd be a time frame involved to see any apparent change. This time frame, if it could be measured sequentially in some way, even 3-dimensionally, numerically, if we could measure what it would take to change the way one feels, and if this was what it took with you with a red circuit, that much cubic area of effort, you do hear me that that would have no effect on the blue circuit. We're just talking about the time involved, the effort involved. But if I measured it out just sequentially and said that much time, X amount of weeks, months, and you could have a discernible change affected in the red circuits, that amount of time involved. In the blue circuits, nothing. The yellow circuits, and I'm saying nothing, there would be no comparable observable change. Now, before anyone gets pessimistic, the attempt to change oneself specifically, surely some of you, I've never put it in exact words before, but since this is a holiday, the attempt to change oneself specifically over a certain length of time with a certain kind of attention given, with a certain kind of intensity, has a lifespan, and the lifespan is a lot shorter than yours. That is, the attempt, to put it very crudely, the attempt to change oneself physically, the red circuits, emotionally, the blue circuits, intellectually, the yellow circuits, to work on one of those will almost get you nowhere. It's just a trick. But you might notice that all the realms in ordinary life, from religion to self-help to psychology to ordinary community wisdom, says otherwise. And it apparently, at the ordinary level of intelligence, has its own validity. And you have people throughout the ages, throughout the different areas of life's body, apparently devoting the core of their attention and their energies, insofar as they're trying to change themselves under whatever guise, be it religious, psychological, or otherwise. They turn their attention on one area. Of course, all of you should see the most popular area throughout the world is in the red circuits. Not just doing exercise, but one of the great other emblematic ways in which life should be congratulated for the kinds of intriguing courses of action that is taken through man is still the ambrosia syndrome. That it's still alive and well. You don't even have to get out and run 10 miles. You don't have to do yoga or some sort of exotic exercises. You don't have to lift weights. You don't have to lose weight. All you got to do is go out and buy the right kinds of health foods. And that this will have a direct effect on your psyche, on your soul, on your spirit. You'll become a better person. It will change you. And I know it's only been a matter of weeks since I absolutely pointed out, but all of you should have some feeling for this. But now, you're not what you eat. What you eat are you. What you eat won't change you. What you eat has almost no consequence. With ordinary people, it has no consequence, other than the fact that it seems to have real consequence. Other than the fact that it is a matter of very strong discussion, other than the fact that they have statistics showing that if you do such and such, dietarily speaking, if you refrain from such and such, they statistically show improvements. Conversely, in the other direction. But as I told you, if you actually belong in this, what you eat is almost of no consequence. But my questions as to the matter of intensity, the lengths of time, me asking you rhetorically and otherwise, could you see that the attempt to effect apparent change on the different circuits would involve different kinds of energy, different time frames, and the most popular remains the oldest circuits, the crudest circuits. Now back to excitement. If an ordinary person undertakes the attempt to change, ordinary person, attracted to certain reading materials and ideas, let us say, they decide, I can no longer eat white sugar, white bread, I can't drink milk, I can't eat meats, I can't drink, I can't smoke, I can't take dope. And they stop doing these things for whatever reason, through reading, through joining up with some group. If they were so attracted, if they were so wired up to attempt such a thing, and many of you have been through this, many of you who haven't, you should feel the truthfulness of it, the person would feel as though something had happened. Some group of people accepted them, you're now one of us, or you're now a neophyte, keep up the good work, or if the person's alone, and they read this book that says, you must do these things to reach a higher spiritual state, or it will make you a better person, it will awaken some kind of higher energies in you, and they're off living by themselves in Idaho, and they tried, even by themselves, they would feel a shift in their system. They would be excited. They would get up, and for a few days it would be like, can I get up today and not smoke a cigarette? Can I stand to get up? It's been 3 days since I had any sugar in my coffee. Can I stand many more mornings of feeling like this? There would be a kind of excitement to it. Now, their own partnership may be talking verbally about matters such as, I can feel a change in me, I must be getting more in touch with higher spiritual powers, and etc. So the partnership could be calling it one thing. But I am telling you, as all of you should know, any attempt to make that kind of change that is directly effective in the red circuit will give a kind of momentary jolt. You will feel a difference. You simply will, if you have changed the habit. The excitement is very short-lived, as all of you should know. Very short. Now, the way humanity is wired up, many hundreds of thousands of people can apparently undertake attempted change of the red circuit variety, very crude, and feel a kind of excitement, and the excitement be short-lived, days, weeks, and yet they do not notice it. They do not notice it in the yellow circuits. They do not notice it verbally. If it is pointed out to them, or if they are asked about it, they will say that they still, 10 years later, are so delighted they gave up white sugar when asked. But in the intervening 9 years, 8 months, 7 days, they've forgotten about it. The habit now is to not eat white sugar. The excitement is gone. Well, a good old memory. They might run across somebody from one of their old friends from the 60s they hadn't seen in 10 years, and they sit down and they have a little herbal tea or herbal beer, and they start talking about the good old days and when they were trying to become more in touch with the great spiritual community of man and how they did this and that. And one said, you were giving up sugar at one time. I remember how you loved it in your coffee and everything. Did you actually carry through with that? I hadn't seen you. It's been now 10 years. And the person goes, yeah, I did. I remember, yeah, that's right. You and I were hanging around in Denver. I remember the day I did it. I remember the last time. But we hadn't seen each other, but I'll tell you the truth, I have not had any white sugar since then. And the person said, was it worth it? And they said, yeah, it was. But that's the first time in 9 years, 8 months, and 7 days that they had thought about it. But good old memory, being able to pull out, like survival memories, little packages, they can pull back apparent little burst of energy of, yeah, I'm glad I did it. I feel so much better. I wouldn't eat white sugar now. But in truth, the excitement was gone. And if any of you can get close to what I'm talking about tonight, in this sense, excitement almost equals change. How about some good stuff about excitement? Try and remind yourself of this. Since, surprising to say, that's too surprising, I won't say that. Try and remember, no matter what I bring back up for the next few minutes, excitement is equal to change. They are synonymous in the way in which I am approaching it. They are synonymous if you get to some degree at a right angle to ordinary reality. And in such matters as this, don't let the simplicity get you, because this is not known. People do not ordinarily perceive this, and you'll see the difficulty of even remembering this, which some of you know by now is the proof of its potential profit. That's how hard it is to remember it under ordinary conditions. There is nothing in life, even at the ordinary level, that seems to be of value to anybody and less to them. And they can be, of course, part of a large group. But it's of no value unless it creates excitement. Such things that would apparently be outside the very crude material realm. Religious affairs. In our day and time, we're experiencing, by some reports, a rebirth of Protestantism, fundamentalism in this country, which is just a viewpoint. But these guys on TV, these guys that used to be out in tents, these guys who are on TV that you can pick up anytime you care to, that apparently are involved with something. Something, no matter whether your line level consciousness finds favor with it or not, they've got hundreds of thousands of people apparently amening their messages. And what is the message? And the message is excitement. That is the message. It's not the medium, it is the message. What is it with politicians? Those that seem to be a cut above the ordinary. What are they? They are exciting within a certain confined manner. There is built into the body of life, in the same way as built into individuals, a continual but confined. It has well confined limits, that is the hunger for excitement. It cannot be too exciting. If it becomes too exciting, the amen corner becomes the naysay corner. Those who might find the entertainer, those who might find the politician, the apparent religious person, find them intriguing, entertaining, informative. If they get too exciting, it becomes frightening. I talk, as I am tonight, about the difficulty of change, and it's not a sermon, it's not something to convince you of, it's something you've got to see. It's the kind of thing that I can describe from several angles while continuing to give a caveat, not to get pessimistic until you see it. Because it can sound like, as Freud would say, a downer. And it's not. But you have got to see that your partnership and everyone else talks as though excitement and change is just a heartbeat away. And it's not. I talk about you and the difficulty, but I am not immune to it. We have been doing these tapings now for what? Over 2 years? Almost 2 years, and look, the decor of the stage has changed a little since we've got some artwork. But what kind of excitement? I do not suddenly reach down like I dropped a pencil and get up and have on the nose and glasses. Yeah. I do not come out and scream. There is a fairly constant tenor and rhythm and intensity. If we could divide you from me, if there wasn't out there, apparently I am presenting it in a certain fairly confined, fairly consistent intensity. I know that many of you feel as though one night here and there was exceptional, but that was not just me. In some senses, I have kept this within, let me say that I have the ability for those who are interested in this. And you're not the only people in the world interested in this. But you people collectively, varying from person to person, but collectively I can see the general confines of your excitement tolerance. And not just you, I have already built into me as far as I care to go personally. I may go further. But if it was just left to my own general devices, I would have my own sort of confines about how exciting I care to be. Not saying I couldn't fake it for some reason, not saying I could not do it, not saying I will not do it, but it just so happens that justice works in a certain way, that your general collective outline and confines of your desire and need for excitement, talk about miraculous, is not that far removed from mine. It's never enough. It may be enough for life, but it's never enough for a person. And part of the questions, the unrecognized part of the questions that people write to me about and that you people wonder about, that some of you here will write me notes about, and sometimes you look at me and you are asking with your little eyes about how can I speed this up? What else can I do? You know, don't tell me to run twice as much, but, you know, something real. Of course, one thing real is you have got to be able to change. You've got to be able to overcome your own ordinary extremes and then produce your own new ones, self-imposed. You have got to be exciting. Many of you, and I could say all of you here that's around me constantly as a group, it sort of reached a place, not just last week, that there is a need for additional excitement. Not that anybody individually wouldn't say, it's been a bargain, and I still get these hot flashes myself, and I continue to feel myself expanding in strange ways, but too much of it seems predictable. There seems at times to be a hunger for additional excitement. But then you ask your own partnership, what would you be having me do? Come out here with a turban, set it on fire, come out here nude from the waist up on one week, from the waist down another week, to talk louder, shave my head, let my hair grow real long, bang on the table, bring out here a big Hammond organ or a piano and sit here, and for a while I'll sit and talk while noodling on the piano. Maybe I should dance. Maybe I should wear a tutu. I am not just being funny, because it still evades most of you to see how hard it is to change, and change equals excitement. At line level consciousness, let me say that all of you, if you were taken back to your own line level consciousness, you and your own partnership, most of you would say that your problems are psychologically based, or that's the way that you would approach them, that's the way you sense them, as opposed to religious, even before you met me. That most of you felt as though you had psychological problems because of the time and place in which you grew up, because of the age of your genetic patterns, that you would feel that more than you were feeling as though you were demon-possessed, that you were chased by evil spirits, that it was a religious problem. Then most of you would have said, I got psychological problems I need to overcome. As an aside, wouldn't it be delightful if this was psychology? Just in ordinary sense. If I just said, fuck most of what I've ever told you and all these maps and stuff, all this is this is right along the sequential path of Freud and everyone else. I am just the latest in line, and I don't have credentials. I never did finish school, or if I did, I'm not wanting to admit it. And that all of this, I just change the terminology and I start speaking as though we are people with problems, and that we do have some free will. We have in some way decided we've got energy somehow outside this system, outside of ourselves. You know, we have our own motivations, and we're all trying to become better people. Wouldn't that be great? Yep. Wouldn't that be easy? It'd make a hell of a lot more sense. And me talking for 2 hours on any given night, we'd cut down to 10 minutes and say the same thing. You'd have to listen in the same way in which I was talking, though. But back to where was I? That you people originally have said at line level, you would have said, our problems are psychological. All right, whatever you said your problem was, that you had fear of women, you had fear of men, you had a hatred of women, you continue to imagine that your mother really mistreated you and you'd like to kill her. You believe that the government is plotting to overthrow and misuse all good people, such as you and I, that you suffer over homosexual daydreams, You're just afraid of being alive. All right. If this was psychology, I could tell you, if I was playing some kind of psychologist instead of being in private practice and dealing with all you people on an individual basis, I could tell everybody. I could give some general descriptions, and I could stand here and I'd start pointing out every week, or all at one time. We'd spend one whole night of me pointing out everybody as fast as I could talk, and I'd say, all right, you do so-and-so, you do so-and-so. And it would be a matter. We could do it here. It'd make you feel a little safer. I could just point at somebody and say, all right, I want you to jump up right now, and I want you to take off your clothes. And I want you to scream at the top of your voice and to run around in circles, and I want you to say this and that. I'm not going into more details because some of you would think, boy, he's talking about me. So, but at any rate, that sort of thing, and if I could make you do it, if I said, you just got to do it, just do it the way I described it, or get out, and you got up and did it, you would feel as though it was a true psychological breakthrough. You would feel as though in some way I have bypassed years of analysis. Now, it's not just what I told you to do. Remember, we're not living truly in a sequential world. One thing does not follow another. But it would seem as though that I looked at you and I said, you, right now, I'm not going to wait around, you're just going to have to do it. Jump up, strip naked, and you start running around this room until I say stop, and I want you to start hollering this at the top of your voice, and I give you what to say. I say, everybody, get out of his way. Go. Just believe me, believe this example. It's possible the person, I'd finally stop them after X amount of time, and they would be, that's right, we weren't going to use non-psychological terms. They would apparently almost be in an altered state of consciousness. And if I'd sit them down, say, have some water, a cup of coffee here, and relax just a few minutes, just sit down, and I give them a few minutes, and we talked about this and that, and I said, all right, can you tell us what happened? You, or this person, would say, some way you did it. Some way you did it, the kind of pent-up hostility that I seem to have always felt, the kind of fear that I've always seemed to have felt sexually, socially, it's gone. It's gone. And their eyes would be like the first time they ever did a free fall out of an airplane. Their breath, the whole system would be in a state of mild shock. It would be jolted from what they were. They would be so excited. They'd be sitting there nude, no shame. They had forgotten about their clothes. They would be ready for anything almost. If we weren't doing it psychologically, I would say there is your moment, or one moment of epiphany. There is a moment of true satori. The person is truly in an altered state of consciousness, but change equaling excitement. That rather than look at what happened and try to analyze it, if we were playing psychology here, I'm telling you right at the heart of it is excitement. When you're entertained, when you think you're being informed, you're being excited. It is an energy transfer, and you are apparently perceiving and receiving new amounts of energy. You are not entertained by anybody from Hank to Gatemouth Brown to Horowitz. You are not truly entertained unless you are excited. The Pope, a rabbi, a fire and brimstone fundamentalist preacher, no matter what the apparent message is, musical, a poetry reading by Ginsberg or someone, a recital, an apparent message of some supernatural import, is nothing. You'll remember nothing. You'll have nothing to say about it in any positive way unless you're excited. What would it take for you to be excited? What would it take right now for you to be excited? I'll tell you what it would take. To be truly excited, you would have to jump up right now in some way. And I'm picking out the lower, cruder circuits now, observable behavior. You would have to leap up and do something that you would not ordinarily do. That's the only way you can get excited. Why are children so excitable? because there's a whole bunch of stuff they hadn't done. They do it once, and that's the end of it. But they've got a handful of years. Nowadays, maybe one handful of years, that there seems to be enough new things that they can stay excited. After that, and yet people believe that change is possible. People can believe, ordinary people, that they have undergone some change. But change equals excitement. Or if you'd like it another, little more complex way, excitement equals change. So now the question, or the situation I present of how truly difficult it is to change, to do anything differently. I'll narrow it down, not just some change over a long period of time of giving up sugar, or some way being able to overcome your fear of social situations. How about just to do something different? That just for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to stand in a different way. Or I'll go get a mohawk haircut. That'll last a couple of months. But I'm going to do something different. I'll have my eyebrows plucked out and I'll paint them on with green shoe polish. There is a sense of excitement if you go home and do it. If you go home tonight and you walk in and you take a razor, men I'm talking about, and shave off your eyebrows and look, you're going to be excited. I'll tell you that. And that will probably hold over to in the morning when you realize I have got to go to work down at IBM, and I got to find me a pair of eyebrows somewhere quick. But you are excited. But now, besides the kind of examples I'm making up, see yourself day by day, even sitting there now, trying to imagine, what do you do that is exciting? What do you do that is attempted change? Now, you say that you attempt change. You say that you attempt to do things that I have described that you never heard of. You say that you attempt to neuralize, that you attempt to cease being a critic of everything you see, hear, smell, and touch, and imagine. But if it is not exciting, you're not doing anything. So ask yourself, what would it take right now? What if I did just say, all right, we're going to devote the next, whatever time it takes, the rest of the night, to all you people sitting here. We're just going to start over here, I'm going to point, and you've got to do something that excites you. I mean, immediately. You've got 5 seconds to react. What would you do? Of course, I could suggest to you that until I stopped it, almost all of you, the only thing that could come to mind is, well, I guess I'll rip off my clothes and run around the room. And I say, where have you heard that before? I truly am not trying to make any of you look back over your last few days and months or years and to feel bad. But you may ask yourself, since I already know the answer, individually and collectively, because I must take responsibility collectively, but ask yourself, how often or when was the last time that you truly felt excited? Have you felt as excited about this as you did the first time you ever saw me or heard me? Or as you did X amount of weeks or months that it suddenly seemed to kind of strike you, aha! But concurrently with all of that, if you were questioned, if I stopped you and jumped out of the bushes all along the way for the last months or years and said, how are things going? And you said, I'm struggling, I feel the excitement of it, I have my bad days, I guess, and I fall back to being me, but I continue to press on. I can feel the challenge, it's always there. Are you excited? How often are you excited? Well, I don't know, I used to be excited a lot, but this has helped me so much that I'm now not as afraid as I used to be and always worried about what people thought. It has a calming influence. It's done that to me. May I point out again, for numerous and sundry reasons, the age-old mystical stories or otherwise of all these great religious prophets, these founders. Can you see, in many instances, that life was just one big old bowl of cherries, or excitement? This guy Jesus, he had it down to the confines in horizontal time was somewhat limited in his case. But you got to admit, right there at the last, the man was not bored. I guess the best example, along the lines I'm talking about in the 3D world, of course, is good old Muhammad. Matter of years there, neither he, I assure you, or anybody around him that was just had any hold on their ordinary senses, they were not bored. There is a dynamic at work in this kind of activity. It's at work, as I've been spending the last 30 or 40 minutes talking about in general, throughout the life of life. But insofar as people continue to believe, without any kind of analyzation, that activity such as this is exempt or is unique or in a unique area of life's body, it is and it isn't. When it rains, we all still get wet. This kind of activity of life. But insofar as people continue to believe, without any kind of analyzation, that activity such as this is exempt or is unique or in a unique area of life's body, it is and it isn't. When it rains, we all still get wet. This kind of activity goes through a dynamic that many people seem to have been cured of psychological problems, that many people seem to have been cleansed, if you were so inclined, of their past demons. And it seems as though, although I deny psychology, that, hey, this has been it. I feel so much better. I don't hardly worry about diddly squat anymore. Whereas before I started this, I was one of the world's great diddly squat warriors. I worried about everything. Now I've become almost some kind of, oh, I don't know, I guess some kind of enlightened slob off on my own. I feel so much more centered, focused, calm, generally non-fearful. It's really been a break I found this. If you are truly prepared to go out with a whimper, something is wrong. Of course, nothing is wrong, but it shows that you have fallen into the mainstream of that syndrome, of that dynamic in life. There are no perfect examples completely across the board, and so I'll jump back and show you, just taking these mythical stories of apparently great, historically significant religious people. About Buddha, I could use him. Don't take any of this literally or factually, etc., because there is no literal or factual. I could say, well, he lived too long, just based upon the stories. that he and his so-called followers ran right into the bell curve, right into the mainstream of the bell curve of this kind of non-exciting dynamic. And they went out with a whimper. I'm not saying this is true, because I'm not even saying there was such a fellow, and these stories have any validity. But if they did, I could say, well, he lived too long. I could say that Muhammad kind of lived too long. But if you try to look at the sequential history of Muhammad in that whole episode, I could say he lived too long. He apparently suddenly decided we've conquered all we needed to, we conquered all that Allah told me to, let's go home. They went home, and that was kind of the end of it. And after that, people point out, well, you lived another 20 years, what do you do? Well, nobody, they don't really know. He used to sit around sometimes outside of his house, and you could come by and say, how's it going, Ace? And he'd say, it's all right. The stories about Buddha. I have seen the truth. I have seen it. Do you want to hear about it? And I went, yeah, yeah. And they were excited, and he talked, and they wandered around 2 or 3, he got out of town. Hundreds and hundreds of miles and walked around. Then, according to all reports, after that, he kind of finally stopped somewhere. He went back and saw his mother and father. I think he bought some new clothes. And he went and he sat down, and he told the rest of them, why don't you guys go around and see if any more people are interested and keep talking and check back in. And just, according to all reports, after that, just some of his people come by and say, how's it going, Hoss? And he'd say, it's all right. And that was it. Would any of you even go so far as to take these kind of unbelievable stories like a Jesus or a Socrates? Would any of you consider the possibility that they had some, on their own way, understanding this kind of dynamics and realize, if I don't take this shot of hemlock, if I don't take this possibility of getting Pancho Pilate really pissed, if I don't do this, I can just see myself sitting around with a whole bunch of people constantly coming around my house or saying, go up and sit on a hill and we'll all sit at your feet and you can say something exciting. And he thinks, well, I've told you more exciting stuff than you've ever been able to hear. Is that how I'm going to end up? It's like some kind of would-be metaphysical Tupperware salesman, R-E-T, parentheses. And they decide, no. Probably no significance to any of that. I just thought I'd say it. Let me try to reinforce a certain kind of pointing, but again, it's so simplistic, and many of you think that you've heard me talk about the exchange of energies before. When I periodically throw back out the phrase that everything is showbiz, that's not an attack on anybody, it's not any form of cynicism. It's a matter, most of you should know by now, when I say everything is showbiz, if anything is going on, you're sitting there now, you people hearing this on tape a year from now, 10 years from now, if anybody's watching this and listening, it is still an energy exchange going on if anything is happening. If you're watching this tape 10 years from now, other side of the world, and going, wow, or something happens and you feel as though this has affected me, this has created some kind of change, there was an energy transfer. On that basis, it is show business. That apparently somebody is putting on a show. That somebody apparently is on a stage and somebody's in an audience. Now in everyday life, this switches back and forth. You're staying in line, waiting to pay at the grocery store. And somebody turns around and they look at the National Enquirer and they look at you and say, can you believe this kind of stuff? And it's like, it was their turn on stage and you can look at it and you respond in some way and then it's your turn. And you take turns being an audience. Many times the kind of exchange going on, such as the example I just used, may be so minuscule that you don't normally even feel it. You can get into your home situation, you get into your situation with your sexual partner, and you should be able to see that it is show business. Every time you speak, it's a form of getting on the stage and you say something and the other person, or even persons, are the audience. And they listen. Then they all run on stage, and you run out and you sit down, and one or more of them say, la, 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 la. And you're the audience. There seems to be significance. There seems to be significance in the variations of what's going on. That it's important whether someone is talking about spiritual matters or whether someone is trying to tell you how to get rich in real estate while having a bum leg and half a brain. That they're two different matters. It'd be nice to make some money, and I spend a lot of time going to these seminars and paying my money for it, but it's not the same thing as being able to travel to Rome and the Pope comes out and says something. I'm not a very good Catholic anymore, but if I was there, I'm sure it'd have some effect, and I would try to listen to what he said. Or if I go to a church or a synagogue, or I go to a metaphysical meeting of some kind, if I'm going to go ahead and put myself there and go there to go there, I'm going to listen, because the person may say something of real consequence because they're talking about matters that somewhere along the line, ultimately are of more importance than making money in real estate. Are you sure? Are you sure on this basis? I ask you, what do you think? How do you feel about the real estate seminar? I love it, especially that one guy. Every time he comes to town, and every time he has a new book, I go there. So you enjoy it, yeah. You get something from it, yeah. You benefit from it, yeah. You know, let's don't push it too far and ask the guy, are you making any more money? But you just say, are you glad you did it? That's not getting anybody a way out. I just want to keep you at the correct level, because the rest of it is just the fine print. If I say, did you enjoy it? Yes. Will you go back? Yes. Every time he shows up, do you plan to go? Yes. I really, it's beneficial. I receive from it. I pays my money, but what I get is a bargain. And I say, well, how's your religious life? And the person says, well, I do such and such. I go to such and such I attend such religious services, and I help keep up the building and the structures and organizations. Again, we won't get in the fine print about how close do you adhere to what's going on. That would just like asking the person at the seminar, how much money do you make from attending that? It's dirty questions. It's irrelevant. If I just simply ask, well, how do you enjoy the services? How do you enjoy your religion? I do enjoy it. It's beneficial. And every time you can, that's possible, you go there. Yes, I do. And ordinary consciousness tells you there is a difference. If you are being excited by it, there is no difference. Those that are apparently involved with areas that would be far removed from the mundane life, such as religious leaders, if they're not exciting, there's going to be no profitable, from the audience's viewpoint, profitable energy exchange. And yet ordinary consciousness believes, and I assume that all of you do know, it's just a prime example, the real showbiz ministers, they're on TV, you don't have to go out of your house. They pace the stage, wave the Bible, have good exciting music, and they pound, they attempt to heal. It is a show, and it is exciting. You do not find the Pope on TV. The Pope does not have a weekly show. You barely find people such as Billy Graham, because he is just almost non-exciting. You would not find, if you'll note, a continuing service presented by the Unitarians. But that should be a short step for some of you to see that, if you have any question about it, it's a short step from there to look at the difficulties of keeping public television going. It's how many people will turn on Washington Week in Review or William F. Buckley's weekly show. They have some audience, but it could not make money. It would not be a commercially successful endeavor. I'll tell you why. Forget anything about political views or about what they're doing. It is simply non-exciting. Now let me remind you again, there are limits to it. When you begin to see this, the first question would seem to be not a matter of limits. The first question seems to be, well, how can I get started? I can almost smell what you're talking about. That if I suddenly did jump up and do something truly different in life, it would be exciting. You can't have one without the other. If you say that you're doing something different and you're not excited by it, you're mistaken. But let us say that you would perceive the initial problem would be, all right, what will I do that's exciting? Then the partnership, let's say that you took my example, that no matter how hard you thought, well, the only thing I can think about, if I took off my clothes out in public around some people and I suddenly ran up and down, ran around the room in some place, like I go to a Native Rith meeting, or I go to a Sunday school, or I go over to the United Way, or I go to a blood drive, and I lay down, they start to come over and test my blood, and I leap off and take off my clothes and run around the Red Cross building, I'm sure I would be excited. I'm just sure of it. I would not go home and lay down and watch TV the rest of the night. I would be excited. And then the partnership says, yeah. But look at the trouble. That's overdoing it. You'd go to jail, you'd be humiliated. You can't do that sort of thing. That is the confines. And it's very limited. When I said confined, it's very limited to where it starts, apparently. Let us say that you are here in toto, whatever that means in the higher dimensional world. But right now you are in this spot, and you attempt to do something truly different. The confine I'm talking about, going from here to where it is too exciting, that it's too different, is not very far away. The partnership will say it is so close that you can't do that. Think of something else. So then you try to think of variations. Let us say that you're still having trouble and you can't think of anything other than what I said. So then you think, all right, what if I just jumped up at a Red Cross place and I just ripped off my shirt? And the partnership sort of trembles, especially, I guess, if you're a woman. And it feels as though that would be different, because that's kind of exciting. I'd be ashamed. I got no hairs on my chest. I look like I've been on a starvation diet. I got no muscles. I'm afraid to go out to the beach. That would be exciting. That would be different for me to do. And the partnership would say, do you hear that I'm going to, if I go any further, I'm going to narrow down and narrow down? And it's not just me. All I'm doing is talking for the partnership, and you, at the ordinary level, would bring it back to the point that you almost find it impossible to do anything. That the partnership's view and feel of it, that's the way it would end up. Anything you do that's different is too much. Right now, you're a free man, you're not under indictment. You say no. Your mother's not terminally ashamed of you. No. Your wife or husband is not threatening to leave. No. The neighbors are not laughing and pointing at you and putting signs in your yard in the middle of the night. No. Your boss doesn't seem on the verge of firing you. No. Well, what do you call yourself doing? What are you asking for? And then you realize you're right. Things are not bad. I mean, life is kind of dull. Sometimes I'm upset. But it could be worse. I mean, what if I had been arrested? What if I'd done that? What if I got arrested for indecent exposure? There goes the job. There goes my wife. That threw me out of the Kiwanis Club. I'd probably end up doing time. Jesus, what a close call. It's absolute, incontrovertible proof that you should not do anything. Everything is fine just as it is. watch television and watch car chases, watch people fight, watch people leave their wife and get a 19-year-old girl or boy. Go to the movies, read a book. Excitement can get out of hand. Now, since we're not psychologists, how about this? How about the absolute chemical basis for staying as you are? How about that some of you should be able to have some small grasp of the situation that you personally have a chemical balance that for all intents and purposes is not to be disturbed. I don't really disturb it because you people already had the inclination to be disturbed a certain amount in a certain way, or you wouldn't be here. There are people out in life, ordinary people, that have the propensity, have the ability to be disturbed a little bit. But it is very confined. And ordinarily it is in ways that have no overall effect on the general health of life. That makes no difference whether you individually are eating white sugar or not. But every question that people have of how could I be moving at a faster rate of speed? How could I be getting minutes of this instead of seconds? How could I take the minutes that I can get and turn them into hours? How is it possible to produce the kinds of things that you keep talking about, of actually igniting parts of the brain, of the nervous system, that are now not in operation? To be able to see and to hear things that are going on right now in a apparently non-material fashion that your senses cannot hear or see, smell. And it is the chemical, the physical reality of all past and present imagined areas of metaphysics, spirituality, higher consciousness. It all smells right when you talk about it, and sometimes it seems to shake my nervous system. I seem to have moments on my own that something happens that is truly extraordinary, that's beyond any realm of debate and any question. But how can I do this all the time? How can I speed it up? Simple. Is excite yourself. But to excite yourself, you have got to truly do something different. That equals excitement. Or for those of you, excitement equals doing something different. And yet ask yourself again, you in the partnership, what could I do? What am I prepared to do? What is legal to do? What is moral to do? What could I do without dying? Then notice the number of things that you could think of that might be passable in a legal, moral sense. But obviously they would have no effect, and ain't worth doing those. That would amount to much, if any, of the things that you might seem to think of your own. Well, sure, I could do that, but no, that wouldn't have any effect. See, what would have a real effect? And the only thing that you'll come up with at the ordinary level is that which goes too far. And the partnership keeps pointing out how you can't, and it'll narrow it back to the point of, well, I'm going to have to think about this some more. But then some of you should be able to get close enough to get this fear, for it to strike you that I did not do bad again verbally, that it is truly very difficult all the way from there to near impossible to do anything exciting, to do anything different. I said it was not my intention to bum you out, but I'll be damned if I am not getting depressed. Thank God I never stayed depressed over about 10 seconds, though. I'll admit it's a cheap way out, but hell, it's a way out, so sue me. How about a few things from life? Sermon topics, pulling out examples from life. How about the good old one I keep hearing, I just heard again the other day, is why I remembered it. Some person of authority, in a slightly excitable manner, they tried, laughed, made them try, pointed out that unless man, talking about a contemporary figure on the news, unless humanity gets over and conquers this whole warfare syndrome, unless we can do away with all wars, the question of man's future is null and void. All you got to do is be ordinary and listen to that, and all over the world people say yes, it's true. Regardless of your political persuasion, regardless of anything, that is a fact. If man does not stop, we're talking about now, we're talking about all these atomic bombs and all that crap. If man does not stop warfare, we're done for. And it's not true. That ordinary consciousness cannot see a triaxial situation. It cannot see that quantum measurements of so-called progress go hand in hand with warfare. Can't see it. But it would strike every, in a certain way, it will strike every person on this planet in life's body at their particular level of consciousness as being correct. If we do not stop, probably in this generation, if we do not stop war, we're done for. And it's not true. And what do you make of that? Another one. Someone was commenting, I'll use the example they used. They used the two so-called great superpowers of us and the USSR, and they pointed out they were going to make a point of something about how there could be areas in which we could reach better agreement and cultural exchanges and small matters and work toward a better state of harmony. But in there was this phrase that you hear continually, that all this might be possible, although Russia and the United States disagree as to the root cause of international tension. Seems obvious, and it's not. There is no disagreement. They both understand that I have a foe that's the cause. There is absolute agreement. Does anybody recall my hint of a royal collusion? But it sounds as though it's an absolute fact, that it's played out in the press, in the UN, meetings between ambassadors, that there is a basic disagreement between Russia and the United States as to the root, as to the cause of the international tensions. It's a fact. It's a fact just like we must stop war or we're all done for. And it's not true. There is no disagreement whatsoever. There is never any disagreement between the forces. Never. It is only to a binary operational mind of what I've been calling C and D and E, that C and D in some way oppose each other. Worse yet, that in some way C and D, if they were personified as little people or countries, that they have some disagreement over what's going on. That's as funny as I know will sound to you, as your forefathers and your religious forefathers believing that there was some sort of antagonism between their gods and their non-gods. I know how funny that sounds. It's almost as funny as individual people believing there is some kind of tension and conflict between in here and out there. I know. It just seems self-evident and silly on the face of it, but that's the way it is. Now try this. I'm not going to give a history lesson It would make a good task for some of you to pursue this on your own. Some of you may be able to feel it in your nervous system already as soon as I describe it. Would you please note this? Take ordinary history out in the horizontal world, out in the world of apparent sequential events. That which is continually described as being a kind of quantum progress, that historians, commentators, observers, can apparently quantify as here, during a specific period of time, great progress was made. I do not mean just over the invention of the cotton gin or dry gin or vermouth. I'm talking about when it seems to be a wide-reaching, quote, area and time of progress, that a whole group of people seem to have become civilized, that a whole group of people seem to have become stabilized and produced great works of art, that the yellow circuit began to flourish in a particular way at a particular time. History is replete with them. Can you see this? That every one of those was directly tied to and based upon one group of people conquering another group. The Romans, the Chinese before that, according to our history, the Saxons and the Anglos, America. Anything that strikes you right now, anytime you want to go back and pick up an undergraduate one-volume history of the world in 600 pages, anytime you want to turn on public television, whether they're talking about arts, sciences, the progress of civilization, and somebody points out, well, such and such was going on, and then Prince so-and-so and his followers, King so-and-so, Minister so-and-so, or this group of people. Over some period of discernible time, as they would have it, this group invaded and conquered this other group, and from that flourished a new blah, blah, blah. Perhaps having a direct bearing upon us today, that we're perhaps reaping the fruits of what sprang from this. But notice, anybody who stayed home and minded their own business was stillborn. They were stifled, they were forgotten. If they're still around now, they're called third world. All you had to do was stay home and not stick your nose in anybody's business, not conquer, not get conquered. And you do not make the quantum history books. Through my mystical ways, I sense that this is harder for anyone to hear than I imagine. That's why I say it to the end. So, now I ask you, trust me that I just told you a fact. You can go and look for exceptions. But every time that something apparently was done, America should be one example. The forefathers of our part of the world was the establishment, so-called establishment of British Anglo civilization, that during its period of time was the ruler of the world, was the fount of the Industrial Revolution. But as far as there being some group of people there in the British Isles, I can't remember what they used to call them now or what they call them in history, they disappeared. They got invaded and conquered, and the people who are now there and called by the name of that country were invaders. Take a short step. Remember, we're not actually talking about history. That's of no consequence. Jump from there. Where was the parts, the avant-garde of life's development from there, was where we are. And everybody here, based upon what it was at one time, everybody here is a stranger. Everybody here is an invader. That none of us came from here. But then look around at places that were not warlike, that did not go around conquering other people. What happened to them? You never hear of them, or if you do hear of them, they're boring. or you find out that the centerpiece of their cultural museum for the whole country is a plastic duck. I'm sorry. Yeah, a plaster duck, not a plastic duck. And that the highlight of their literary endeavors is in that one well-known epic poem of There Was a Young Girl Named Tucker, that I'm sure all of you know. What I was going to ask you is difficult, is I still sense that most of you feel that this is, or else you've absolutely missed what I was saying. It's worth pursuing on your own, and for me to leave you by asking, is it possible, now individually, since we're not interested in the Romantic conquest or the Anglos and the Saxons, and of all of our forefathers and mothers invading the poor Indians here, other than that, now turn it all inside, as though there was an inside to you, and ask yourself this: is it possible to stay home and prevail? Then ask yourself, does this have any possible relationship to what you were talking about 15 minutes ago? What is more boring than staying home? Do you think that you would have ever heard of Nero, Alexander, etc., had they stayed home? Would you ever heard of William of Orange or Fred of Apricot? Would we even be here in America if the Anglos and the Saxons had looked across the channel, looked around where they were and thought, geez, let's leave them be? Or they just looked around and thought, good God, it must be 8 or 10 miles across there. We're going to have to either build boats or go in debt. And there's nothing wrong with where we are. What if a few wild-eyed people three, 400 years ago made a few little trips, came back over to Holland and Spain and England and Germany and said, hey, if you get in a boat, one of these boats, and you don't die and you don't drown, and you sail way, way off, and you go for months and months and starve and get scurvy and almost horny to death, if you do all that, you get to another place. And there's nobody over there, hardly. It's a bunch of old people. You can beat them up and take care of it. But there's hardly anything going on. And if everybody had gone, all of your forefathers and foremothers, and went, well, I'll admit that sure does sound exciting. I can hardly resist, but I think I'll stay home. We would all now probably be fighting for that one position as caretaker, looking after the plaster duck. Can you stay home and prevail? Can you stay home and do anything truly different? Why is it apparently, I'll jump back and give you a hard example, the examples throughout history as I started, that every time there seems to be a quantum measurement of so-called progress, just in the ordinary sense, it is always tied directly to one group of people invading and conquering another. And you fail to see the importance of that. Some of you fail to even hear what I'm saying. Nobody, just take ordinary history as it's taught and written. There's nobody that deserves and gets a headline in their table of contents. Nobody is pointed out in high school or college. In popular history, that nobody, suddenly they start describing, all right, here's this group of people, community or nation X, and we find them now back at X BC, and they stayed there. And something seemed to flourish. Go try to find it. If it flourished, it is tied directly to, well, there seems to be some traces. They have archaeologically found certain traces here and there. They seem to have been living there, and they seem to have developed a kind of slightly post-hunting culture to where they tried to establish roots and began to do a little farming. And then suddenly it seems as though there's a period of time we can't account for, but for some inexplicable reason, they seemed a whole bunch of them suddenly ran 20 miles south and invaded this area that we now know of. And they seemed to have fought 4 or 5 years, and they just took them over. And then, within a matter of years, they suddenly began, instead of fighting, they suddenly began to dance, they began to paint, they began to sing and write symphonies. But it's always that this group left home and invaded somebody and conquered them. Then from that came something. It's a fact. Nobody ever noticed it. So I ask you, is it possible to stay home and prevail? Why does it seem to be absolutely required that this one group, jump back to apparent history, has got to leave where they were, wherever history finds them? There they were. They left there, and if they're going to amount to anything, you don't have to read any further, I'm telling you. If you pick out an area that you don't remember ever reading about, some area of history, some area of this planet, if they're going to be written about, if you can skip over and look at another page or two, and they're going to get 4 or 5 paragraphs, I can tell you this. And you see like subheadings of so-and-so's art, so-and-so's culture. I can guarantee you, don't read any further. I predict already, they're going to go conquer somebody. They got to, or nothing happens. Does this have any pertinence, I wonder, to an individual person? Can you be peaceful? Can you be homogeneous? Can you be all the little yous that you are now? You could be this little country. And you're at home and you're minding your own business and you speak the same language, you and the partnership. You got the same taste. Your taste hadn't changed. You've always liked country music. You still like country music. You like it like it used to be when you began to like it. You like opera, but you only like operas that were written before such and such time. Everybody in you likes opera. Everybody in you is a Orthodox Baptist. You're peaceful. You try to mind your own business. You will never be heard from. If you started reading about yourself and they didn't use your real name, it'd put you to sleep. If you picked up a biography and it said biography, exciting biography of Mr. or Ms. X, and it was actually you, your life, but they changed the locale, they changed the name, and you started reading, how long would it take you to go to sleep? You would not make history. You would not even make your own history. You would not notice you. Do you not find it curious? Nobody's ever noticed it. But for there to be an apparent quantum movement of so-called progress, if you can look at it for the time being as simply being real change. One group left the peaceful valley, one group that may have been rather homogeneous. They left there and they went somewhere that required non-peaceful means, and when they got there, they were not confronted with a likewise homogeneous group. They're always foreign enough that they look at them as being foreign. It's not like just a slight division. It's not like a group of our brothers-in-law or our cousins. That don't count. You got to go out and attack and conquer somebody that there are discernible differences. Color, religion, politics, locale, and then they intermingle. They're no longer the homogeneous, whatever they were to start with. They're no longer that group. They're now that group and part of this new group that they conquered. It is only from that apparent progress, real change happens. Can you find any possible consequence, any possible significance to that individually? I mean, I know I can't, but I just thought I'd ask. I couldn't resist throwing in a zinger since so many of you were getting nowhere with that. I'll leave you for the time being with that it's a fact. As always, you're welcome to find me wrong, to find an exception, but you won't. How can any change happen? How can apparently any excitement be created? How apparently can things progress by any definition without the conquest, without the movement of one group into an area that is foreign to them, not their cousins? It's got to be a foreign group. They got to move in and they got to conquer them. They got to mingle with them. Well, I prefer to stay home and cover my own ass. no sense getting too wild at this state of life. Man could get hurt. Man could get disappointed. Something terrible could happen. People could talk about you. The partnership could talk about you. I had a very good question or two. How much time we got? But I've been carrying them all these weeks. I guess I'll carry them longer. Reinforce something I mentioned recently. This should be an absolute fact with all of you. Is you should be continually under your own self-imposed pressure. Pressure sounds a little too psychological. It should be your own kind of new extreme. But there should be a continual amount of self-imposed pressure, a task. And it doesn't matter what. And most of you would still wait for me to give you something to do. But it should be anything. But it should be apparently something that you picked out. And if you picked it out, the closer you get to the area of apparent E, that may be too confusing. Not the closer you can get close to apparent E and it will still be fine. But all of you should continually be involved with some self-imposed, even near irrelevant task. All of you should continually be attempting to either lose weight or to gain weight. All of you should be attempting to run 1/2 mile further every month than you did last month. When you get up to 100 miles a day and it's interfering with everything, you know, ask me and we'll talk about it. You should be attempting, literally, to do something such as to memorize all the parts to Hamlet. Not just vaguely, not just in the future, but between now and Christmas. And you're going to devote in the same way that you might do it in the red circuit if I said everybody in this room between now and Christmas has got to lose 20 pounds. I mean, I don't care if you 20 pounds underweight now, do it. Well, of course, you're 20 pounds underweight. You got to put on 20 pounds. All right, the same kind of effort you would have to make. Either I or you figured out, all right, this is going to take a minimal amount of effort, such and such effort per day, such and such effort in general. All right, you'd have to say, all right, I'm all looking at the number of pages to Hamlet and all the parts and knowing the way my yellow circuit ordinarily works. I guess I should start working 2 hours a day, 6 days a week if I'm going to do it by Christmas. And do it. Or if you have the least appearance of being able to play the piano or guitar, is to go borrow a piano or guitar and say, all right, between now and Christmas, I am going to learn to play with both hands, all 12 scales, forward and backward, non-stop at a reasonable tempo, and I will learn to play from beginning to end that an ordinary person would recognize, learn to play Old MacDonald Had a Hernia, a farm. Yeah, I'm going to do that. And do it. You're missing a real opportunity. It is not the kind of real excitement that I've been talking about, but all of you should be continually involved in a secret, self-imposed, pressurized task. That I'm going to lose 20 pounds whether you particularly need to or not. It's not going to hurt you. And the Vanderbilts and everybody else has proved that you can't be too thin, etc. Lose it and then put it back on. All right, those of you that might be more appropriate, I am going to a gym, if you're a man or a woman, do your own way. I'm going to a gym and I'm going to put 2 inches on my little skinny arms and 2 inches on my chest. I am running now 3 miles a day. Within 3 weeks, I am going to run an extra mile. And then 3 weeks after that, I'm going to increase another ½ mile. There should be something like that continually going on. It will not produce a new state of consciousness per se. It will not turn you into an enlightened being of some kind. But if you're not doing at least that, you're not doing anything. Unless you know how to create excitement, and I don't see any of you actually doing it. Everybody keeps hanging around waiting for me to say, okay, here it goes. We're going to open up publicly next week, and it's going to be the Church of Eternal Nudeness. And everybody except moi has got to show up nude. And when I snap my fingers twice, you've all got to start running around in circles. And I'll take it from there. Bail money will be available. I don't guess I will make it an absolute task, because most of you should be to the point that you can hear what I am saying. But you can't. You're making a mistake to put off such as that or say, yeah, I know that's true, and I can't think of anything. Fuck all that. You can always, the most intelligent of you, and I'm sure somebody is the very least, is you can say, between 9 and Christmas, I am going to get to the point that first thing in the morning I can hit the floor and do 40 push-ups non-stop with no effort. That's something you can do, that every morning I'm going to get up and I'm going to hit the floor. Let's say right now you don't do them, and that you can barely do 5, right? Whatever I can do starting right now until further notice, I'm going to do that 3 times before I even throw water in my face. I'll do 5, and I'll rest whatever it takes. If I can do 5 again, I'll rest and I'll do 5. I'll do that for a week. Well, of course, within a week you'll be able to do 10, and you do 10 that same way. There should be something like that going on. It should be secretive. You shouldn't be talking about it, as all of you should know. It's nobody's business, and it can apparently be irrelevant, as I said. Hey, I think I'll lose 20 pounds when you are below the insurance standard for your height. It doesn't matter, but something that requires effort, and something that you apparently imposed upon yourself, and it may approach the irrelevant. Or I will go to learn to do 40 push-ups. I like that, learn to do 40 push-ups. Even I have trouble with the King's English. But it's their fault. They made me do it from being around these kind of people. But you can say it's irrelevant. I'm not in the Marines, don't plan to be in the Marines, and if they try to call me in the Marines, I'll leave town. So what? There should be some self-imposed, pressurized task going on continually. And as soon as you can reach whatever it was you decide to do, such as the 40, you should either be aware that the excitement, the effort has run out of this, even before the 40, or somewhere along the same line, and ditch it. Then take up the time you're spending to do that, take up the complete memorization of all parts of Hamlet, that you could stand up and do, say every part from beginning to end, if any of us had the desire to ask you to do so. Personally, being more athletically inclined, I'd prefer to see you do 40 push-ups than to have to listen to you do. Seeing as how the tape is almost at the end, is it? Hardly any time for a task. But I do want to conclude by saying to one of my New York hairy friends, happy birthday, Fuzzy will be 18 in a week or so. Happy birthday.